I love 360-degree architecture. I like thinking of all sides of the house, not just the front. You see so many homes are just, they look great from the front, but they're boring on the other three sides. So we're always thinking of that.
I think what people really care about in the engineering phase is like orientation, setbacks from the road, and then also what their yard's gonna look like. Understanding, you know, what the grade lines mean and stuff like that.
How's a pool gonna possibly work in my backyard? To me, it's all about the keywords. Okay, so what's next, right?
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the DJK podcast. We're back here today to talk a little bit more about our process. In our last podcast, we kind of made an introduction to our new home guidebook, which is essentially, you know, our process here on paper on our website, and really the structure that we take all the way from, your first visit with us here at our model home, exploring floor plans, exploring, where you want to build in your home site, all the way through the completion into, the completion of the home and warranty stage. Today, we're looking to focus, on the next stage in the process, which is going to be our architectural design phase, all the way through permitting, which will also encompass, that engineering stage where we really start putting the home on the lot and getting into a lot of the fine details of things. To start it off in that architectural and design stage, they work direct with you, obviously.
They do.
Whether the home was sold through one of our, new home sales consultants, they wind up getting in your hands to really refine their architectural design, take all those ideas that they had put on paper in their new home proposal, and really get those customized into a home of their own. First things first, in that first meeting, whether it's an in-person meeting or a virtual meeting, depending on the client, what's like that really the first step when you're really coming into the meeting? What are those initial conversations you're having at this point? And
that's a great question. So, when we kick off that architectural design phase, it's post-construction agreement. So we've got all those notes that we took the time to put together to create the construction agreement. And a lot of the key things are our home cost sheet, which kind of goes through and it labels out, okay, which floor plan are you driving this design from? Or maybe it's starting from a complete custom, like back of a napkin type start. Or it's, working with a design that maybe you're changed your mind a little bit from the time we wrote the construction agreement to that stage, which happens very often. So basically what I do is, this is where, a huge part of my process is I take those plans. My first step is to get them an initial draft, because either that or we're just kind of retouching on what's in the construction agreement. So I work with the draftsman and the architect in the background, along with the engineers who do all of the site planning itself. Work with them in the background to create that initial draft. I get that initial draft put together. That's the time frame when I set an appointment, whether it's in person or Zoom meeting. Very rarely is it just through email, because I really need the conveyance
engagement
and be able to, talk together and bounce ideas off of each other, because, as you're bouncing ideas off of each other, things like the plan design really progress as well. So that's, that initial time frame. And then I'm looking for feedback from the client.
And at that stage, that initial plan that you're coming up with, that's just floor plans at that stage. We haven't gotten into elevations.
Yeah, exactly.
Although we've got the elevations, we've got notes on kind of where we're going with the elevation.
Correct.
We get in that a little bit later on in a couple of the later revisions, once we've really refined things, and we can put an elevation to that plan.
Yeah, my focus is always to get the first floor and second floor, if it's a 2-story home, completed. So once I get those completed, and if we're doing a finished basement, I always wait till those first and second floor plans are completed, and then I move on to the basement.
Yeah,
and the main reason behind that,
the footprint.
Could modify, right? If that first floor changes, and it changes often, a lot of people go into it, thinking one thing, they talk to a friend or spend more time on Houzz or Pinterest or whatnot.
Even spending time just studying the plan concept that you initially came up with, right? And like, kind of virtually walking yourself through, like, okay, I envision myself in this room. Maybe, Maybe I want it a little bit bigger. Maybe we want a linen closet here. Maybe we want the door here.
I think that's the beauty of they understand that we're 100% custom, right? And with a lot of builders and such, you don't really get that opportunity. It's like, hey, here's what you get, and which is a plus and a minus, right? Because if it is a here's what you get, it shortens the time frame.
Yeah.
But nobody that's purchasing from us really wants a here's what you
for
get.
That custom experience. They're building their one on
They've already had
home.
several homes. Yeah. And they're looking for something specific, and so we start getting into different revisions from that standpoint. We get that initial draft done. We talk about things that they like, things that they dislike. I come back to them with a second draft of the floor plan. We do that same again, right, where we go back and forth. We chat about those revisions or changes, and this is all about the floor plan again. Still, until that floor plan is spot on and everybody's 100% happy with it, that's when we start to move on to exteriors.
And what would you say, what's the time frame on that from that initial concept? Well, tracing back a little bit, you got that initial concept from the time someone signs a construction agreement with us to the time they're seeing that initial floor plan concept based on their notes, and meeting with you, whether it's Zoom or in person. What would you say the approximate time frame is between those two stages?
I'd say it's very dependent on client and how much additional ideas they've come with since the construction agreement was put together. But the simplest design is going to be maybe 2 weeks. To the more complex or maybe more detailed or more changes, it might stem into 4, 6. I've had it go 8 weeks plus.
You're talking once you're getting into multiple revisions.
Multiple revisions, which is a lot of different idea changes, right? And what I always look at it this way. I want to take things at the client pace, right? I don't want the client to feel like they're, forced into oh my gosh, DJK's got to have this plan done in 30 days. We would love it done in 30 days. That's the time frame that keeps us completely on task with a schedule that's conveyed early up front, right? But
when we convey our schedule, we try to say, hey, this is kind of the baseline of how things could go. But like you said, everything's at the client pace. There's a lot of people that want to mull it over for quite some time, and we're consistently getting ideas, revision after revision after revision.
Vacations come and play and all that stuff,
we've had
right?
that where it's like, hey, I'm going, to Europe.
I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks.
4 weeks or whatnot, and we'll revisit. We'll resume.
We just look at it. That's okay. We're not gonna freak out about it. It is what it is, and we'll keep that design rolling. And even sometimes when people go out of town, I'll tell them, hey, before you go, let's have a quick meeting so that I can be busy while you're gone, and getting to the next review to just keep some pace going on it.
Yeah. So we go through anywhere, I'd say it's probably anywhere from 3 to 10 plus revisions, depending on how complex the home is, how many different ideas.
6 is my key. If I can have it done in less than 6. I kind of call that, okay, you're on task with kind of normality, right?
So we finalize that floor plan. We, get through those multiple revisions, get a floor plan that's solid. Then we say, essentially, hey, let's move on to elevations.
Correct.
That's when we give the architect kind of the green light, say, hey, okay, here's our, the architect already obviously has at this point, he's got our elevation notes from the contract.
Whatever was in the construction agreement,
and we might add to that, say, here's where we're at today, based on, the conversations we've had with the clients. This is kind of our wish list for the elevation. Let's get some elevations put to the floor plans. Those elevations come through, and then kind of restarts that process a little bit with refinement, right? We're taking those elevations, say like, this looks great, but we're thinking these things here. We want to see more, steeper roof pitches, or we want to, and
what I was going to say is sometimes their elevations, like one of our clients, may come to me initially at construction agreement phase and be looking for a very, timeless style exterior home, right? But, then they kind of convince
ultra modern home,
right? Kind of convince themselves through the process, that they just fell in love with ultra modern, and sometimes that elevation change may force some floor plan changes, right? Because of the ins and outs of the elevation. I love 360-degree architecture. I like thinking of all sides of the house, not just the front. You see so many homes that they look great from the front, but they're boring on the other 3 sides. So we're always thinking of that. But again, if you change design styles, ins and outs, things of that sort,
Yeah.
it could modify the floor plan, which sometimes just backs us up a little bit, right? Because I've got to take and do some shifts to the floor plan to be able to get it to work with those elevations.
So we've spent several revisions getting the floor plans done. We've then moved on to elevations, got those elevations refined.
Yeah.
What's the next step after we've got those two key components locked in?
Well, part of an add to that and goes to the next step is while I'm doing those floor plans, while I'm doing those elevations, multiple times there's changes such as, hey, we want a covered porch off the back of the home, or hey, that master bedroom is a little smaller than we were hoping, and could we expand that? And we may add a couple hundred square feet to the design as we're going, and I'm trying to let the client know during the process what the financial impacts are.
Yep.
Right. And it could be something simply from a square footage standpoint. It could be something like you had mentioned a little while ago about, roof pitches, could be, window heights. Sometimes people are saying, hey, what if I do a 10-foot first floor instead of a 9-foot first floor? All those things have different financial impacts, and which drives us kind of to that backside, right?
Yeah. Resetting the expectation a little bit.
Right. Totally. Right. And we get it. Okay. Floor plans are done. Exterior elevations are done. We talked multiple times through the process of the different financial changes that have, happened. So now it's resetting those expectations and what we call putting together a design change modifications form, right? We call it the DCM sheet for short. Yeah. And people hear us referring to that often. Yep. And that really is your home cost sheet with the third column that's highlighted in red populated.
Yeah, showing all those different things that have been changed on the plan, whether it's added square footage, whether it's
correct.
We've decided to add a sauna in the house, and we're going to allocate an allowance for that, whatever it may be. It really kind of resetting that expectation of, hey, based on where we've got the plan to date, where things are looking like. Here's a budget to work off, right? We may have allowances and such in there. They're gonna then get into the stage with our selections coordinators, designers later on.
Yeah.
But that's basically resetting that expectation.
It's an important part, right? Because everybody is always concerned about the finances, right? And so we're making sure that we're doing our part by showing them, hey, here's your cost going along, giving them a little rundown of where these costs are heading as we're going, not just a surprise at the end.
And it allows them to, if they've already, working with a lender, possibly go back with their lender and say, present their adjusted budget and make sure, the finances are all in play, that they've got proper funds in the construction loan and proper, end loan approvals to make everything pencil out.
It all makes a difference. And it's all, with all of these different podcast series we're going to do here, right? To me, it's all about the keywords. Okay, so what's next, right? And so you get to that. That's what's next of this process to the next process is really getting down to, okay, now we're done with the architectural design. We got through the preliminary drawings. We've finalized it. We got the costs all ironed out. Everybody's pleased with where we're sitting financially. Now, from there, we're ready to move to a permitting phase.
Yeah. So we're gonna do the final plan sign off, right?
Yeah, we're gonna ink it, right? We're gonna say, okay, we're all good with this. Plans are being signed off on. Now we're going to be able to submit our permits.
Well, and so those plans that we're signing off on at that stage, we're signing off basically go to permit. At that stage, the plans we're signing off on are close plans to what we would need to submit to the municipality for permit, but they're not
minus
permit
all
ready plans. Minus
exactly.
a lot of the the details that get added to the plans, the structural calcs, everything like that. So once final plan sign off occurs, then that plan we put our stamp on it, send it off to the architects and say, hey guys, this is good to go to permit. The architects have their whole checklist of things they need to go to permit. They get working on adding all those details, making sure everything's in the plans. Meanwhile, our team's busy preparing what we need to do to submit that permit once we receive all the documents. So there's a lot that obviously goes into permit submittal than just one set of plans. When you've been working with the architects, jumping back a little bit, we've got the engineers in the background. Once our architects have that foundation layout, we're going to our engineers, we're supplying that layout to them, and they're popping it on the engineering plan for the home. We're, again, showing the client too, like, hey, this is how the home's going to be oriented on your home site. go over kind of how some of the grades are going to work and stuff like that. So that's happening kind of as that architectural, on the tail end of that architectural design.
Yeah, they're always that engineering piece we talked about a little bit earlier is going on as we're doing the architectural phase, and the site planning, preliminary site planning, orientation of the home on the lot, which
I think what people really care about in the engineering phase is like orientation, setbacks from the road, and then also what their yard's going to look like, understanding, what the grade lines mean and stuff like that.
How's a pool going to possibly work in my backyard, right? Am I going to have a ski slope coming out my back door, or is it going to be well thought out where, I'm going to be able to have a pool sitting out back and not feel like we're walking out our door and, down a hill per se, right?
And there's obviously a lot of other stuff that goes into the engineering than just, what you see, right? Then we're working out the storm sewers, the sanitary and water, that's all on that engineering
specific grade heights that is driven by city codes, stormwater management, all the utility connections, how they're going to come into the house and so forth and
that's
so
where
on.
a lot of those things that you'll see on our home cost sheet under kind of that site development section really come into play in the engineering, the home site. There's a lot of variables,
we can dial it in.
And that's all kind of happening on the tail end of architectural and continuing. And at the same time, the architects are working on their permit set of plans. Our engineers are working on their permit set of plans, hand in hand with our architects, to make sure both of their plans coincide.
And then we've got the mechanicals too, right? We've got to send all these drawings off to our mechanical contractors to get all of their calculations completed,
get
right?
our energy modeling done.
Correct.
Get any fees paid that are required to be paid before permit submittals, any receipts for those. So there's a lot of things that are happening all at once, between plans, engineering, and all the additional things that come along with permitting. But the hopes are that once we get that those plans in hand from the architect, from the engineer, our staff kind of has all of our documents together. We've already got the permit app all filled out, whether it's a paper app or an online, and we're ready to get all that documentation submitted to the municipality so we can get the show on the road with permitting. Now, obviously, once we submit for that permit, we've got all our docs back. We submit for permit. What does the expectation look like?
From a timing standpoint. Well, once we submit for permit, we're always looking at, and it varies municipality to municipality. There's some towns that we see a 1 week review and we have permit, right?
Yeah.
Don't always take that as here's how it's going to go, because most towns you submit, you have a 3 week initial review.
3 to 4, yeah.
Yeah, and you rarely ever pass on an initial review. There's always something, right? And then so they send it back with their permit comments, and then our architects, our engineers, our mechanical contractors all jump in and they make their changes, typically done in a couple of days, and then we get things resubmitted. And then we go back into what we kind of look at as that waiting stage, right? Which people tend to feel like nothing's really going on, but in a minute we're going to talk about where you're headed next and why things are absolutely going on. But if you happen to fail again, then it's typically another 2 weeks.
Yeah, you're always back in the pile, right?
You're back in the queue.
It's not like you just, because you got a permit in, all of a sudden your revisions go right to the top of the pile. It's all in a process.
Right, but the great thing is
there's a lot happening while we have these permits in.
It's other
phases
what's
of the
next,
process,
right? It's like we're heading into, as soon as we have those permit plans done and we're submitted, the client moves right into the next phase, right? Which is our interior design and selections phase. And plenty to do there, right? Oh, there's a lot going on while that permitting is happening. And it really does feel like a well-oiled machine in there, because while we need that time frame for selections and such while that permitting is going on.
Oh yeah. And otherwise, if you just moved straight to building, you'd have a lot of setbacks, bottlenecks that you would hit, because there's a lot of things in selections that are all being selected, ordered.
Yeah.
The way it works is our selections team, designers at Refined Design, do all the selections on the project, but then we have a whole nother team behind them that's actually making all the purchasing happening to get that product, get the cabinet, whether it's cabinetry,
there's a lot going on.
Lumber order, there's a lot going on that all meshes together. So, even though we feel like we're kind of in a waiting period with permitting, we've got all this other stuff in the background, and our team's getting ready to rock and roll.
And then we, just prior to that, once we're done with those permit plans, we get those permit plans sent out and do what I always think is one of the most exciting parts is, right, we take all of those conversations we've had with the buyer about color tones, materials, and such that they're looking for on the outside of their house, and we kick off their interior design and selections phase with a 3D rendering of their home. And, I've had people come in and just go like, oh my God, this is it. This is beautiful. But in the case that those 3D renderings raise a red flag and on something that they thought wasn't going to look just like they thought, it's okay. We've got time in there. So in that, we got that 3 weeks of first review at the permitting. So we could always take and make some adjustments if need be to have those ready for that resubmittal. Because like I mentioned earlier, it's a rarity to ever pass your permits on the first round, with the exception of a couple villages that seem to always pass on first round.
Yep. So we'll be in permit phase. We'll have our project kickoff meeting, get selections rolling. In our next episode, we'll talk a little bit more in depth on how that selections process works.
Yeah, it's an exciting part of the process, and I personally think it's the most exciting part for the client. I think the architectural design phase is really exciting, but it's in 2D, right? So it's black and white drawings, and sometimes
it's very engaging.
Not
for
as
client,
easy to understand.
Getting into the selections phase and really starting to understand, how the home's going to look. And
but when they
really
see the 3D rendering, it's always like you see it on their face, right? Yeah. It's wow, and that's kind of a great way to kind of segue right into that next phase, that interior design and selections.
Yeah. No, well, we appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see you on the next video where we'll talk about the selections phase. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you later.